Right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Patriots Law Group, where we are talking about all the legal strategies for military divorce. Welcome back. If you're tuning in for the very first time, this is where we bring you some legal specialists, Mike Lyons and Patrick Hughes, who really help those of you who are going through the challenges and complexities of a military divorce, whether you're an active duty, a veteran, or even a military spouse, and you have some questions out there and need a little bit of assistance. They're here to bring you some tips, some best practices, and answer some questions out there to help you navigate through it. Now, we have a special topic today. We have a different one on the 2nd and 4th of every single month. That's where we're here. And today is all about the top 5 discovery tips in a military divorce. So I'm Maureen Edwards. I'm going to just help move the conversation along over the next 30 minutes. And I want to bring Mike and Pat to the table because they're the ones who are really going to be bringing the real information to us today. So hello, gentlemen.
Hi, hello, Maureen. How are you?
I'm doing great. I am so happy to have both of you here. And let's dive in because I know you bring so much substance to these conversations. And I want to make sure, I know this one is jam-packed. So we're going to dive into the first tip. And I know, Mike, you want to go ahead and take that. So let's go ahead. Dive into our top tip number 1.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it. So in discovery, I see all the time cases go from beginning to end and finally get to a point that we're talking retirement orders. And some of the most basic information that you think would just maybe naturally fall out of the discovery process is missed. And this is where I think we need to start because you need it for the retirement orders, and that's asking for what's called the pay date, and I'll explain that in a minute, the date of rank, and then what retirement plan a service member's in. So first, the pay date. What is the pay date? So the pay date aligns with the day that the service member entered active duty, okay, or took the oath, and basically it's where the calculation of credit towards a military retirement is calculated off of. So when we look at a pay chart and we see, number of years of service, and it says, and basically every 2 years there's an increase in pay. They'll say over 15 years is one pay rate, over 14 years, and over 16 years is another pay rate. So in order to know where I need to be looking at that chart to figure out the service member's pay, I need to know that pay date. So in the interrogatories, ask, what is your pay date? That information can also be found on the member's leave and earning statement. So that's another alternative, is to request and ensure that you have a leave and earning statement. The other key piece of data, as I mentioned, is the date of rank. That's not on the leave and earning statement or the pay stub. That has to be asked. So asking for that information in interrogatory. And then finally, the retirement plan. There's different types of retirement plans that service members get. In fact, the one that Pat and I are under is different than the ones that service members who enter presently, let's say this year, get, because they've transitioned to a blended retirement plan with TSP components. So you need to know that. The multiplier is what it's called of calculating military retirement pay is different depending on retirement plan. So that's tip number 1.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit.
I was just going to jump in, Maureen. Well, I don't want to assume that everyone who's joined us knows what discovery is either, because we talked about it a little bit in our prior video, but if people jump right into a settlement agreement without engaging in discovery, then they might not know certain things that they would want to settle around and resolve. Discovery is that process within a case where, prior to going into court and litigating the case, the parties have the ability to obtain information from the other side or the employer of the other side or what have you. And that's really what all these tips are generated around, is how do we best present a case to a judge if we have to, or to understand what people on the other side have that might not be known by your client, so that way it can be adequately divided as a marital asset. So that's what we're talking about here as far as our discovery tips, and that piece that Mike's talking about is a big one. So that way we understand when a certain person, achieved their data rank, and all the things that may go into dividing a retirement and so forth.
So tell me a little bit about these military pension orders. I know that has come up before, and we kind of briefly talked about it. Can you give an idea of where this would come into this topic?
Yeah. So in a military divorce, when a military pension's been divided, a special order needs to be prepared. A lot of people call it a quadro, but it's actually different. It's a quadro applies to a different type of pension. This is a domestic relations order. And in that order, you need to specifically calculate the average pay for a service member for the last 36 months of the person's military service leading up to the divorce. You need to specifically state what is the member's grade at the time of the divorce. And it's those two pieces of information that in order to get there, you need to know the pay date and the date of rank to make those calculations. We do these orders all the time. It's not something that a lot of family law lawyers do in-house, but we will do a military pension order and a TSP division order. We get requested a lot to do what's called a FERS order, which is a Federal Employee Retirement System division order. Very similar, but we don't have the expertise in that like we have for military. So we have a really great referral network for those. So if anybody needs those, we know where to put them.
That's great. That's great. What a great tip to kick this off. And, pretty detailed. I think a lot of people don't know what discovery is, and yet it's so incredibly critical. And so let's move into tip number 2. So Pat, you're going to handle that one. What's tip number 2?
So it's very much aligned with what Mike was just talking about, in that there are these documents called a 214. Many people know what that is, but some may not. It's 214. What is issued by the military after you are coming off of active duty time, and so that is important. Alongside of if someone happens to be a reserve member, there's also this points accumulation that is tracked, because the retirements are not the same between an active duty member and a retirement or a reserve member, and so those data points are important to acquire, to know, all right, how much time has this person served on active duty, how much time has he served or she served as a reservist, depending on the person's circumstances. We would need to get access to these DD-214s to, if there are more, which more than one, some people don't realize that you can have one or multiple rather issued, especially if you're a reservist, if you're going on and off active duty. The details within those documents are quite important. The Air Force, as Mike and I know it, we have a system called PCARS that tracks a reservist's points, and other services have similar databases that track those points. The points are what determine how much of a pension that member will get and how much can be divided by a court, because it's all based on how much overlap between the marriage and the time in service. So a marital asset is only divisible if it was accrued during the marriage. So when someone's married to a service member, that time counts towards a divisible marital asset, but time outside of that window that they were married is not typically divisible. So getting these documents, the DD-214 or the point summary for a reservist are quite important, especially just thinking about what it could lead to. If you have military service and a marriage overlapping a total of 10 or more years, and that can lead to implicating something called the 10-10 rule, where DFAS will honor paying directly to the now former spouse of the military member the money that is divided through the divorce. And I think anyone would agree that it would be best to receive the money directly from DFAS as opposed to having to rely on your now divorced ex-spouse to have to pay you. So if you can get and take advantage of those opportunities that, like the 10-10 rule supplies, that, and there's other things that the 20-20-20 rule and other rules that can be implicated, all these can be known and identified through acquiring certain documents, to include this DD 214 and the point summary for a reservist.
You know, just in the first 1 and 2 tips here, there are a lot of accumulation of documents that have to come about. And so some people could be really overwhelmed with this. And so they've got to pull a lot of information. And so you help guide them through this to make sure that all of this is in order, because if they miss 1 or 2 of this, and we haven't even gotten to 3 more, this could impact them dramatically.
Yeah, well, and there's an important thing to note, because we see it all the time, Mike and I do, is people who are representing the other side, for example, may not even know that these documents or things exist to ask for them. And so they're lost on many non-military affiliated attorneys, and so a client is going into it into the dark without having certain information that would really avail them to additional, benefits or, potentially assets that can be divided.
Right. All right. So let's move on to number 3. It's amazing information. Yeah.
And number 3 is a real nugget. In fact, I would say anybody who's out there watching this, write it down and take it to your lawyer if they don't have any military experience, because it is by far the easiest thing to overlook. And that is service members, when they go on travel, what's called TDY, sometimes deployments, all these different things, may be entitled to travel pay, per diem, basically extra cash for them to eat and drink and sort of get through that travel period. Well, that money, although it comes, and it could be as much as $190 a day. And I know people that have gone on TDYs that are months long. Pat actually had a case where he got people some per diem for a year or more, I think. In any event, that money does not show up on a W-2, and it doesn't show up on a pay stub. And so what you want to do is to ask for the travel vouchers or the advice of payments related to travel voucher reimbursements and the payment of this per diem. Ask for the very sophisticated, or some might say a very shady, spouse could set up the automatic deposit to a new and hidden account. And if that money isn't asked for, or excuse me, if those documents aren't asked for, that money may be sitting in a pot, maybe invested in Bitcoin, growing in value, and never gets noticed. And honestly, I never see those requests coming from opposing parties about travel vouchers, but they should be. And that one, I think, is a real nugget. I don't know why we buried it 3, maybe to hold a little bit of a trade secret on our side in these cases. But
all right, I'm definitely kind of be that as a teaser on my follow-up tomorrow, that people have to tune in, and that's why it's a good one to be in the middle, because they've got to go ahead and go through the first 2, because that is absolutely gold. And the fact that it isn't considered income is really kind of interesting, because it seems like the government wants everything considered as income, and it's not taxed, I'm gathering, either. So tax-free.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. So wow. All right, Pat, are you going to beat that one with number 4?
I don't know. I'll try, I guess. Well, so as a catch-all, one of the things, you have the tools in your tool. So you can ask for a party to admit or deny certain things, and you can depose them. Those are the typical tools in discovery. And in large part, when you're sending interrogatories or requesting documents, you're still relying on the other side to give you what you're asking for. They either say, hey, here's all the documents I have, or here's my response identifying what I know to exist based on what you've asked me in this interrogatory. But we're firm believers of the whole trust but verify approach. And what we ask of the other side is obtain an authorization from them, so that way we can request their military records on it. Privacy Act is the law that applies, but once a Privacy Act authorization is given to a person, they're able to obtain what's identified within that authorization. And so, the DD 214 or the point summary for a reservist or other things that we're talking about today that we're asking to get from the other side, we can go directly to the military with this authorization and ask for those things if they're not produced. And we can, double check that what is being told to us by the other side is accurate. And if not, obtain additional documentation from the military directly if we've seen that something might have been missed out from the response that we received of the other party.
Right. Well, I look like I'm actually getting the numbers straight today, and we are actually on number 5. So, Mike, you got the last one to cover, unless you had a comment about PATS.
Well, now I was just going to chime in just a bit on PATS, and yeah, that's one of the things, frankly, that we as a firm and our ethos is really concerned with, is making sure our clients know what they don't know. And we have a lot of clients that are coming in saying, hey, I just want you to write me up this settlement. I think we've talked about this in prior videos, but we think it's absolutely critical to sort of use the interrogatories to basically set up the breadcrumbs for where we go and get the verifiable, no kidding, certified documents from third parties, because that you can bank on. What people say when they're in an adversarial proceeding, and at the end of it, half of the assets are going to be, whoever perceives the asset as theirs. In the case of the military retirement, that's typically the military member. They feel like they're losing half of something. And so for that reason, there's a lot of natural inclination to sort of maybe not lose as much as could possibly be exposed. So I think Pat's hitting the nail on the head there. Every available avenue to verify information is what should be done. And that's what we do at Patriots Law Group. All right, so number 5. There's something called the Survivor Benefit Plan, SBP, and once it's waived, it's forever waived. And so when we have a family that's getting divorced after retirement has occurred, it's possible that survivor benefit, the SBP, was waived on the day of retirement. And so when somebody's fighting over or leveraging to get the SBP, it may end up being a nothing burger. And so right out of the gate, ask that question. I've also seen it the other way, which is the other side says SBP has been waived, and they keep just sort of brushing it off, but never giving any proof that it's been waived. And in that case, if you just sort of say, oh, okay, he or she said it was waived, and you leave it alone, but you didn't verify, to Pat's point, then you might actually be giving something up that's a real huge benefit. So ask if the SBP has been waived, save everybody some time, and be sure. Ask if the last thing, and it sort of is combined with that, is ask for the retiree account statement. And so both of these 2 points, unlike the prior 4, which really focused on active duty, divorces, or at least active service, the time when people are still getting to retirement. And these points relate to once they've gotten to and they're past and have retired. But the retiree account statement has all the information that's needed to know what will the former spouse get as far as retirement. We can do that math real easy when it's that scenario. But then also it tells us if the survivor benefit has been waived, because it would show the premium being paid if it was not. And so that's one of the ways that we can trust, we've asked, and verify by looking at the retiree account statement. So that's another critical document that if it exists in the case, you got to get it. So, and that's 5.
Great. Yeah, those are our top 5. Wow. I think that's incredibly helpful for, anybody who looks at a military divorce. It is complex, it is challenging, and it really does have some nuances that is very different than just a civilian divorce. And this is why I think it's so important that you have military attorneys, because of those hidden little things that we are talking about today. And, for all of our legal professionals who tune into this to kind of, level up their knowledge of things like this, we have a lot of you out there, and, I'm hoping that you're picking up, some gems today. I can't imagine that you're not, but I want to go to, a question, because, you get client questions all the time. You get people just inquiring. And I know, Pat, you had one that comes in quite a bit. Can you share that with our audience?
Well, that actually goes to supporting our legal colleagues who might not be entirely familiar with the process, because we've had to consult with people in the DC area a few times now on subpoenaing records. Maybe you're not given the authorization that you're looking for from the other side, and you still need to try to get these documents from the government if you can. It's a pretty complicated process, unfortunately, because any official document to be able to obtain from the government requires a certain process to be followed. There's something called the TUHI process. It's after a case, and it basically sets forth the justification that needs to be made. It's a completely separate thing from issuing a subpoena. You actually have to write up a memorandum and get it to the appropriate officials who, on behalf of that particular agency. More often than not, it's a particular legal office that would review the TUHI request to make a determination as to whether that official document should be released. And it gets more complicated because alongside of that subpoena, the subpoena cannot just be an attorney-issued subpoena if you're seeking any documentation that contains personal information within it. And basically all of what we're asking for would. And so in order to get a valid subpoena, and this is all based on federal law and what the process is as established by the federal law. So it doesn't matter that a state law says an attorney can issue a subpoena. The federal agencies in particular here that we're talking about, the military, they're not going to honor that if it's just an attorney issued subpoena, if the TUHI process is not followed. And so anything implicating personal information that implicates the Privacy Act and requires, as a result of that the subpoena be issued by a judge. So the only way to get that judge to act to issue a subpoena is if you file a motion to the judge and ask the judge to do that. And so you can't even start the process of getting the information you want from the military until you've gone through this whole process to get the military the information that's required as part of that TUHI process and what the Privacy Act requires. So much involved there that so many people have no familiarity about as an attorney even. And it gets very complicated. I'm just really scratching the surface. But so that's why we've been asked to consult several times now to help an attorney who has their own client and wants our assistance to get through that subpoena process. There's even some federal agencies that might not even comply if you've done all those things, because although some services, I know the Air Force is one, that their stance is that as long as it's any judge, then they'll honor it. But at times it appears DFAS has said it can only be issued from a federal court judge. So how do you do that when all you're involved in right now is a state action? You don't even have a federal court involved. There's just so much complexity to it. And it's just something that you hope you don't have to deal with by getting that authorization, the Privacy Act authorization from the opposing party. That kind of helps eliminate that subpoena requirement. But if you need to do it, then as I've discussed how complex it is, think about how much time you need in advance to make sure that you've taken the proper steps to get the information before you're walking into the court for that hearing. You need to make sure that you've taken these steps well in advance, months in advance, before because you'll never get the documentation in time otherwise.
Right. And there's just delay upon delay, which costs everybody in the long run. And you bring up a good point. We're in like the last couple minutes of our segment today, but one thing that Patriots Law Group offers is that consultation and providing that guidance for the legal community because of the fact that you have this experience with this very specialized complexity, that you can help consult others out there. You're not just working with those navigating a military divorce, in the military community, but you're also helping the legal community in their efforts to help others. Yep. So people, in the legal community, please reach out to Mike and Pat if you are in need of being consulted through this. That is a service that you do offer. Right.
That's right. I was just retained. I was down in San Antonio. The reason I'm not in my formal attire, I'm down here at Hilton Head for my vacation this year. So, but before that, I was in San Antonio, and just the day before I left for San Antonio, I had a lawyer reach out to me with a client, and we do this more and more now, who has a military connection. And I've been retained in that case simply to bring the experience and the expertise on the military issues to that case. They have a lawyer that's doing all the family law. I meet with the client. I do about an hour's discussion with them to identify all the military issues, draft up a memorandum, give it to their attorney, and then once settlement comes around, they'll have me review and do different things on the settlement agreement. And then once the case is done, have us do the pension order. It's typically a military and a TSP type pension order. More and more attorneys are realizing, I think because of a lot of the training that we've been doing around the state, that there's just a lot of pitfalls between the federal and the state interplay, between the really nuanced regulations. I mean, even some of these documents we're talking about have different names across the different services. So we can absolutely do that, and have now made that a formal part of our practice, really.
That's great to know.
Yeah.
Well, in the last couple minutes, one, I want to thank both of you for unbelievable information for both, the military community who have to navigate, really a very emotional time during, a military divorce. And for those of you who are going through that, I mean, look at, Mike and Pat, who are very specialized in this. This is your go-to resource for people who understand what we're talking about, how nuanced, how complex this is. This is beyond, a civilian type legal process, and they are your go-to lawyers for this. And so if you are in that community, this is who you need to seek out. And if you are a legal professional who, also needs to have a better understanding, this is your consultant right here to get you through that. So they are a multifaceted legal team. So we are going to close this segment. We are at our 30 minutes, and we understand we want to be very respectful of your time. We will be back at the 4th week of the month with another topic to help you navigate military divorce, as this is their specialty. And so if you do need to reach them, you can go to their website, PATRIOTSLawGroup.com. They're also here right on LinkedIn. You can give them a personal DM, and they are on Facebook as well. Go ahead and DM them directly. They would love to be able to talk to you personally and see exactly what you need. I'm Maureen Edwards. We're going to close out this segment, and please tune in a couple weeks, because if you heard the gems you did today, which I'm sure you did, you're going to want to learn more. So we'll see you in a couple weeks, and take care, everybody.